Have you ever felt lost, searching for a leader who can guide you with justice and wisdom in times of crisis? The story of Samuel, the last judge of Israel, is a beacon of hope and a powerful example of how God raises up leaders in moments of need. Samuel was not just a judge, he was the link between a turbulent past and a promised future for God's people. In an era of disorder and challenge, when the nation was on the brink of spiritual and political collapse, Samuel emerged as a voice of clarity and justice. His calling was not easy. He faced the pain of rejection and the responsibility of delivering difficult messages, but his faithfulness and courage showed everyone that, even in the darkness, God never abandons his people. In this journey through Samuel's life, you'll discover how his providential leadership ushered in a new era of hope for Israel and how, through his faithfulness, God transformed a nation. Get ready to be inspired by the story of a man who, through his dedication and bravery, became an eternal example of how faith and justice can prevail, even in the darkest times. Let's explore the life of the prophet Samuel and discover how, by following divine leadership, we can find our own direction and hope. Let's delve into Samuel's story by starting with the meaning of his name, which carries a wealth of interpretations and symbolism. The name Samuel has a profound and varied meaning, reflecting the importance and impact of this great prophet in Israel's history. The most common interpretation of his name is a heard by God. Just imagine having a name that suggests God heard your prayers. This meaning harks back to the moment his mother, Hannah, fervently prayed in the temple, asking God for a child. She was in such deep anguish and despair that her words could barely be heard, but God, in his infinite mercy, heard her silent cry. Another meaning attributed to the name Samuel is a one who comes from God. This reminds us that Samuel was not just an answer to Hannah's prayer, but a direct gift from God. He came into the world with a divine mission, already destined to be a leader and prophet among his people. From the moment of his birth, his life was marked by a profound connection with the divine. There are also interpretations suggesting that the name Samuel means a promised by God. This interpretation reflects the vow Hannah made to God. She promised that if she were blessed with a child, she would dedicate this child to God's service for his entire life. Samuel, therefore, was not just a desired child, he was a promised child, consecrated to God from before his birth. Each of these meanings helps us better understand who Samuel was and the significance of his role in biblical history. He was not just an ordinary man, he was someone chosen and prepared by God for a great work. This rich tapestry of meanings in his name already gives us a hint of what was to come in his extraordinary life. Now, understanding these meanings, we can see how every detail of Samuel's life intertwined with the divine purpose for his existence. Let's dive deeper into his story, exploring how these interpretations of his name manifested in his journey as the last judge of Israel, a powerful prophet, and an anointer of kings. Samuel was the long-awaited son of Elkanah and Hannah. His father Elkanah was a devout man from the region of Ephraim, and his mother Hannah was a woman of unwavering faith, but with a deep sorrow in her heart. Hannah was unable to have children, which at that time was seen as a great misfortune. She suffered not only from her own pain but also from the taunts of Peninnah, Elkanah's other wife, who had children and used this to mock Hannah. But Hannah, in her sadness, did not lose hope. Every year, when the family went to the Tabernacle in Shiloh to worship and offer sacrifices to God, Hannah would kneel in fervent prayer. She poured out her heart before the Lord, asking for a child. Her prayer was so intense that once the priest Eli, watching from a distance, thought she was drunk. However, when he approached and spoke with Hannah, he realized the depth of her suffering and the sincerity of her pleas. Hannah made a solemn vow to God: if he gave her a son, she would dedicate him to the Lord for his entire life, as a Nazirite. A Nazirite was someone consecrated to God in a special way, abstaining from wine, not cutting their hair, and avoiding ritual impurities. Hannah was willing to give up the greatest desire of her heart for God's service, an act of faith and total surrender. God heard Hannah's prayer and blessed her with a son. When the baby was born, Hannah named him Samuel, which means a heard by God. Every time she called her son by name, Hannah was reminded that God had heard her prayers and responded in a miraculous way. Hannah fulfilled her promise. When Samuel was still a young boy, maybe around 3 years old, she took him to the tabernacle in Shiloh. Imagine the scene: a mother handing over her beloved child to live and serve in the temple, away from the comfort and security of her home. It was an act of profound faith and obedience. Hannah trusted that God would take care of Samuel, as he was a divine answer. Under the care of priest Eli, Samuel began his service to God. Even as a child, he stood out for his dedication and seriousness in his work at the tabernacle. Eli soon realized there was something special about the boy. Samuel wasn't just there because of his mother's vow, he had a divine calling to fulfill. From a young age, Samuel learned to listen to God's voice. He grew up in an environment of worship and service, shaping his character and preparing him for the significant role he would play in the future. Each day at the tabernacle was an opportunity for him to draw closer to God and understand the divine purposes for his life. Samuel's childhood was marked by a fulfilled promise and a heart devoted to God. His story teaches us about his mother Hannah's unwavering faith and the importance of trusting in God even in the toughest circumstances. Samuel, the boy heard by God, was destined to become one of the greatest prophets and leaders of Israel, and it all started with his mother's sincere prayer and total dedication. This story shows us that from the very beginning, Samuel was surrounded by an environment of faith and devotion, and his childhood was just the beginning of a life full of divine purposes and accomplishments. As Samuel grew up under Eli's care in the tabernacle, he demonstrated exceptional dedication for his age. He was involved in all sacred tasks, from cleaning the temple utensils to maintaining the lamps and assisting in the ceremonies. Though these tasks seemed simple, they were crucial in serving God, and Samuel carried them out with great zeal. One quiet night, as Samuel slept near the Ark of the Covenant and Eli rested in his room, something extraordinary happened. Samuel heard a voice calling his name, Samuel. Samuel. Thinking Eli was calling him, he ran to the priest, who, surprised, said he hadn't called and told him to go back to bed. When the voice called Samuel a second and third time, he went to Eli again. Realizing something divine was happening, Eli instructed Samuel to respond if the voice called again, saying, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." Following Eli's advice, Samuel returned to his place and upon hearing the voice a fourth time, responded promptly. It was then that God revealed himself to Samuel and gave him a profound and direct message. Eli's house would be punished for the sins of his sons, whom Eli had failed to correct. The message was so impactful that God said he would do something in Israel that would make everyone's ears tingle. Even as a young boy, Samuel received and held onto this message with great responsibility. The next morning, Eli asked what God had said. Reluctant and fearful of displeasing his mentor, Samuel told the whole message without omitting anything. Eli, recognizing the justice of God, accepted the message with resignation, saying, "He is the Lord, let him do what is good in his eyes." This event deeply marked Samuel's life. From a boy serving in the tabernacle, he became a prophet chosen by God. The Bible tells us that as Samuel grew, the Lord was with him, and everything he said came to pass. Thus, all Israel acknowledged Samuel as a true prophet of the Lord. His ability to hear and obey God from a young age laid the foundation for his ministry, serving as an example of faithfulness and dedication to divine will. As Samuel continued to serve in the tabernacle, his dedication and integrity were evident to all. He had learned to hear God's voice, a skill that would soon be tested in significant ways. One night, God called Samuel and gave him an important and difficult message to deliver. God revealed to Samuel that Eli's house, the priest who had raised and mentored him, would face severe punishment. Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas, had committed many grave sins, disrespecting the sacred offerings and living corruptly. Although Eli was aware of his sons' actions, he had not disciplined them properly. As a result, God decided that Eli's lineage would not continue in the priesthood, and his family would face destruction. Imagine the pressure and fear Samuel must have felt receiving this revelation. Eli was like a father to him, and now Samuel had to deliver a message of divine condemnation. The next morning, Samuel was anxious, trying to go about his daily tasks without revealing the turmoil in his heart. He knew he needed to tell Eli, but how could he hurt someone he loved and respected so much? Eli, noticing that something was different about Samuel, called the young man and asked directly, "Oh, what did the Lord say to you? Don't hide it from me." May God do to you the same and more if you hide from me anything he told you." Reluctantly, but with a determination that could only come from his faith and obedience to God, Samuel told Eli everything. He didn't hold back any details, sharing the entire message from God, including the warning that Eli's house would be judged for its sins and failures. Eli listened attentively, and with resigned acceptance he said, "He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes." Eli acknowledged the divine justice, and even though the message was harsh, he accepted God's will. This experience marked a turning point in Samuel's life. He had shown courage and faithfulness in delivering a difficult message, even in front of his mentor. From that moment on, it was clear to everyone that Samuel was a prophet of the Lord, someone who spoke directly with God and whose words always came true. This story of revelation and prophecy isn't just about the message itself, but about Samuel's character. He demonstrated that being a prophet of God requires not just the ability to listen, but also the courage to speak the truth, even when it's hard. Samuel teaches us that obedience to God should be our priority, no matter the circumstances. After Eli and his sons passed away, Samuel took on an even more significant leadership role in Israel. The people were in a state of confusion and spiritual decline, often oppressed by the Philistines, their longtime enemies. Idolatry had spread among the Israelites, distancing them from God's commandments and weakening their identity as his chosen nation. Samuel, with his unwavering faith and commitment to God, saw the urgent need to lead the people back to the right path. He began his mission by calling the Israelites to gather at Mizpah. There, he made a powerful and moving appeal for repentance. Samuel urged the people to forsake their foreign gods and serve only the Lord. He knew that Israel's true strength lay not in its army, but in its faithfulness to God. Touched by Samuel's sincerity and passion, the Israelites responded to his call. They gathered in large numbers and confessed their sins, showing a genuine desire to return to the Lord. Samuel, in a profound act of intercession, offered a sacrifice to the Lord on behalf of the people and prayed fervently for them. Meanwhile, the Philistines, noticing the large assembly at Mizpah, saw an opportunity to attack. They marched against the Israelites, hoping to catch them off guard and disorganized. However, Samuel was not unprepared. He continued to pray and trust the Lord for victory. God answered Samuel's prayers in a spectacular way. As the Philistines advanced, the Lord sent a mighty thunderstorm that threw them into panic and confusion. The Israelites, inspired by the divine intervention, rose up and chased the Philistines, defeating them completely. This victory was not just military but also spiritual, marking a turning point in Israel's history. To celebrate this victory and remind the people of God's help, Samuel set up a stone between Mizpah and Shun and called it Ebenezer, which means thus far the Lord has helped us. This monument served as a constant reminder of God's faithfulness and the importance of trusting in Him. But Samuel's work didn't stop there. He knew that spiritual reform needed to be ongoing and sustained. To ensure this, Samuel established an altar in Ramah, his hometown, where he regularly returned. This altar was not just a place of sacrifice, but also a center of teaching and judgment. Samuel made an annual circuit, visiting various cities in Israel to judge the people, resolve disputes, and teach them God's ways. Under Samuel's leadership, Israel experienced a period of peace and prosperity. Idolatry was abolished, and the people returned to worship the Lord sincerely. Samuel not only guided Israel as a judge but also as a prophet who maintained constant communication with God, ensuring the people followed divine precepts. Known for his integrity and devotion to God, Samuel faced painful challenges at home. His sons, Joel and Abijah, whom he had appointed as judges in Beersheba, did not follow his example. They accepted bribes and perverted justice, tarnishing the reputation for fairness Samuel had established in Israel. The corruption of Samuel's sons caused great disillusionment among the Israelites. The elders of Israel, tired of the injustice, went to Samuel in Ramah and asked for a king to lead them, like all the other nations had. This request was a heavy blow for Samuel, as it meant the rejection not only of his sons but also of the leadership he had exercised under divine guidance. Samuel, in his sadness, took the request to God in prayer. God comforted Samuel, explaining that the Israelites' rejection was directed at him, not Samuel. God instructed Samuel to grant the people's request but also to warn them about the consequences of having a king, including taxes, conscription of young men for the army, and servitude. Reluctant but obedient, Samuel explained to the people the costs of a monarchy. Despite this, the Israelites insisted on having a king. Samuel then anointed Saul as the first king of Israel, starting a new era in Israeli history. Despite his son's failures, Samuel continued to serve faithfully as a prophet and judge, guiding Israel and maintaining his dedication to God. His response to his son's corruption and the people's request showed his resilience and commitment to divine will, even in the face of personal disappointments. With the deterioration of leadership in Israel and the corruption of Samuel's sons, the people began to desire change. The elders of Israel went to Samuel in Ramah, asking for a king to govern them, just like the other nations around them had. They were dissatisfied with God's direct leadership and wanted a visible and tangible leader. Samuel was deeply troubled by the request, knowing it meant he was being asked to change the leadership system established by God. He prayed to God, who revealed that the people's rejection was not of Samuel, but of God as their king. God instructed Samuel to grant the request but also to warn the people about the consequences of having a king: high taxes, compulsory military service, and the loss of certain freedoms. Samuel explained these implications to the people, but they were resolute and continued to demand a king. God then revealed to Samuel that Saul, a man from the tribe of Benjamin, would be the chosen one. Samuel anointed Saul as Israel's first king, marking the beginning of a new era. Saul's anointing was accompanied by divine signs, and he was introduced to the people as their new ruler. The choice of a king brought significant changes to Israel, starting a new phase in its history. Despite the warnings and challenges, Samuel's role as a prophet continued to guide the people, maintaining his mission to follow and serve God. With Saul's deviation from God's ways, God decided it was time for a new king for Israel. Samuel, the prophet and judge, received a divine mission to anoint a new leader. God instructed Samuel to go to Bethlehem in the tribe of Judah and anoint one of Jesse's sons as the next king. Samuel feared for his safety, as anointing a new king could be seen as treason. God advised Samuel to perform a sacrifice in Bethlehem, which served as a pretext for his visit. When Samuel arrived, he invited the leaders of Bethlehem to join the sacrifice. Jesse presented his sons to Samuel, starting with the eldest, Eliab, who seemed suitable. However, God rejected Eliab and the other brothers, stating that he sees the heart, not the appearance. When Samuel asked if there were more sons, Jesse mentioned David, the youngest, who was tending the sheep. David was called, and upon his arrival, God revealed to Samuel that he was the chosen one. Samuel anointed David with oil, symbolizing the divine choice for him to be the future king of Israel. David returned to the fields, while the Spirit of the Lord came upon him and departed from Saul. This act marked the end of Saul's reign and the beginning of a new chapter under David's leadership, a man after God's own heart. Samuel is a central figure in Israel's history, recognized as the first great prophet and the last of the judges. He initiated the prophetic tradition, establishing a model for future prophets by communicating God's will and guiding the nation. As the last judge of Israel, Samuel provided stable and righteous leadership during a time of instability. His role was crucial in transitioning from the period of the judges to the monarchy, anointing Saul as the first king and later David, the future king who would consolidate the kingdom. Samuel helped shape the beginning of the Davidic dynasty, ensuring leadership that would be central to Israel's history. In addition to his political and prophetic role, Samuel is remembered as a hero of faith for his devotion to God and his integrity. His legacy is a lasting testimony of leadership, justice, and faith, profoundly influencing Israel's history and spirituality. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen to learn about King Saul's story. See you in the next video.